So hello, today I'm going to show you how to take a logo that you have designed in Illustrator, get it into Blender, render it out, light it, set everything up, and then you'll end up with your logo on a transparent background in 3D. This tutorial is aimed more at designers who want to try to get into 3D, and I think this is a nice opportunity if you already have a logo or something that you have designed in 2D and you just want to give it a little 3D touch. So let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do is to check if your logo is ready to be exported as an SVG, and the easiest way to do this is just to check it out in the outline mode, just by hitting Command or Control Y, and then you'll see the paths, the outlines. And as you can see here, the text is still a text, and you will have to convert this into paths. So the easiest way to do this is just to hit Control-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O, just like so. And if your shape that you have created is consists of multiple objects, like this one for example, I just put them there for example, then you will have to just join them together using the Pathfinder tool, like so. Get that. Oops. Just like so. Wonderful. And as you can see here, this path is just has a stroke around it, so you wouldn't need to outline this stroke. Easiest way to do this, just select it, go to Object, Path, Outline Stroke, and then you have the stroke outlined, and it's ready to be exported as an SVG. So you just select everything that you want to export, hit your right mouse button, click Export Selection, and then from this drop down menu choose the SVG option. Sometimes it's on PNG or JPEG depending on if you have already used it. I think usually it's set to PNG. Name your asset however you like. I'll just name it a logo, and then choose the folder you want to save it to. Okay, I'll just replace this, and it's saved. Wonderful. Now we can jump into Blender, and we're using Blender 2.8. It's in beta right now, so you can download it from blender.org if you don't have it already. And you won't need these things, so the camera, the cube, and the light. Just select everything by hitting the A key. By the way, you'll see my shortcuts here in the corner, but it's quite small, so I'll just explain them as I go. Yeah, hit A to select everything, and then hit X to delete. Click it or just hit enter. Now you have your empty scene. Now you can import the SVG by hitting File, Import, and then SVG. Now just jump to the folder that you have exported the whole thing to. I've got it right there. Select it, hit Import SVG. Okay, now you can just zoom in, and by hitting Shift and the middle mouse button you can pan around, zooming in. You do it by just zooming in and out with your mouse wheel, and rotating around the thing around the viewport is just by clicking down the middle mouse button, like so. Alright, so now we have our logo imported, but as you can see here, they're separate objects, separate curves, and for this application you would want to join them all together. So just select everything by either clicking on them while hitting Shift, or just again hitting A to select everything, and then you can just join it by hitting Control or Command J. Wonderful. It's quite small, so I'll just zoom out and scale it up a bit by just hitting S and then moving my mouse. If you like the size you just have, then hit the left mouse button. Wonderful. I like to rotate my logo so it stands upright. So just hit R for rotate. Or I think it's, yeah, you could either hit R for rotate, hit X for rotating it on the X-axis, and then typing in 90 on your numpad for 90 degrees. Or an easier way to do this now, since we have Blender 2.8 with this nice icons here, you can just click on the transform button and then you're greeted with this transform tool. So you can just select the axis you want to rotate it on and then rotate it, and by hitting your control key or command key you can lock it. So in the top left corner you can see the degrees, so I'll just put it at 90. That looks good. And yeah, so here, if you just get the selection tool again, you can see that our origin point, which is this orange small dot here, is not in the center, which is not terrible, but I would like to center my logo in the middle of my viewport. So the easiest way to do this is centering the origin point and then centering that to the viewport. So you do this by just hitting your right mouse button and then set the origin to the center of mass surface. Now you see the origin point jump to the middle of our logo, of our object, and by hitting Alt G, you can center the whole thing, just like so. Now we are going to extrude this whole thing by just going to the curves menu here, scrolling down, hitting the geometry tab, and then just increasing the extrude value here. And by the way, you can just click and drag, and if you hit shift while doing this, the increments will be smaller, so you have more gradual control over the value, or you can just click and type in the value you want. So I like this right now. It's of course personal preference on how much extrusion you want to have, really. Yeah. So now I want to bevel the edges a little bit, so we have a more smooth transition, since nothing in the real world has a sharp corner like in 3D. So a little bit of bevel helps to give it a little bit more of a organic, realistic feel, just a little bit. So I'll just increase the depth value, just a touch. Whoa, that's a little bit too much. See, and now even the shift value does not help, so I can just type it in manually, just add another 0. That's looking quite nice. And since we did not increase the resolution yet, we just have a chamfer, so it's just beveled once. And if you want a smoother transition here, if you want a round corner, you can just increase the resolution. And now you have a nice smooth corner. Yeah, this is looking nice. At least in my opinion. It's all personal preference, so just do whatever looks right for you. Okay. And now we'll set up a camera and some lights to render this thing out. And I always like to split my screen into two. So on the one side I have my camera view, and on the other side I can adjust my camera placing and the lights. So if you want to split something in Blender, you just go to the corner until your cursor turns into this cross. Then just click and drag to the left and you can split the view. And if you want to close it again, just go to the corner again and then click and drag to the right, and then it'll close. So yeah, just split your view into two. By hitting T, by the way, you can hide these the toolbar here on the left side. So while in the viewport with your mouse, you can just click T, then it'll hide. And yeah, so I'll just add my camera. By hitting Shift A, you can add things. So Shift A. and then go down to your camera. Wonderful. And now we can move it again, like we did before with our logo. You can rotate here everything, or you can move it by just selecting the arrows here. And if you are in this viewport, you can just click the camera icon, or hitting numpad 0, you can jump into the camera view. Yeah, I like to reset the orientation, and you do this just by hitting Alt R, and then your camera will reset its orientation, and now I can just rotate it back up 90 degrees like we did before with the logo, hitting Control to lock it into 90 degrees. I can move it back a little bit, and this seems about right. I can see here that the origin point is not quite in the middle, but in this case it's not too terrible. I can just move it a little bit to the right and move the camera back again a little bit. That's looking good. So now we're still in solid view, and we can just switch to rendered view. I will be using Eevee at first, and then I'll show you how you can switch to cycles for ray tracing, but first we'll use Eevee for rendering and lighting. So just if you just scroll to the side here, you have your shading options. So now you're in solid, then there's the look development option, and then there's the rendered option. So I'll just choose the render view, and now we can see that the background is gray. I would like to have it black, so I'll just go to the world settings here, and then just click on the color and make it black. So now we are in absolute darkness on our rendered view, and I will add some lights now. You do this just by hitting Shift A and then going to light, and I'll just use an area light. You can also just experiment with it, choose some other light, have fun with it, but I'm just going to use an area light for now. And as we did before, we can just move and place it with the transform tool here. I'm going to scale it again. I'm going to scale it up again with S, and then move it here, rotate it a little bit, so we get a nice, some nice light on our logo. This is looking quite nice, and I'm going to add a second light. You can either do this by adding it again with Shift A, or just by duplicating the light you already have by hitting Shift D, and then you can just lock it to the Y-axis if you want to. So you just move it on the Y-axis by hitting Y. If you like the position, you can just hit the left mouse button and accept it, and I'll rotate it a little bit just to give it a little bit of rim light so it stands out. I think it's a little bit too bright, so I'll just go to my light panel here, and then just decrease the energy a bit. Let's see. Well, this is looking alright. We can also change the color of the light just by hitting the color option here, and then just making it, for example, just a little bit blue, a little bit of blue. That's also looking quite nice. And if you don't like the material of your logo, and by the way, you can just hit the overlays icon here to get rid of all these overlays, so you just have a clean view of your object in the camera. Yeah, we can just change the material of the logo. You just go to the Materials tab while having the logo selected, and then just by clicking Use Nodes, it will convert the material to something more usable for Blender. So click Use Nodes, and then I'm going to just change some values. Here this is the principled shader, which has most of the material properties that you need for basic materials. So I'll just decrease the roughness, so I'll just have a more shiny look, maybe just a little bit of roughness. That's looking quite nice. and then I'm gonna change the base color. I don't know, maybe to something white. This also looks quite nice. You can also just add metallic if you would like, if you are going for a more chrome look. If you like that, then you would have to change up the lighting a little bit, because else it doesn't look so good. But at this point it's just experimentation, seeing what you like, seeing what fits your project, and then go from there. So I think I'm going with a white look with a bit of roughness. I think this looks quite clean, and like I said, it's just adjusting it to personal taste and whatever the project you're doing requires at the moment. Oh, this is looking quite nice. So now we are ready to render, and the first thing I would do is, well, it depends, but if you want to use your logo in a design, then the best way to do this is by enabling transparency. So you can do this by going to the render option right here, then moving down to the film option right there, and then just you can't see it so well because of my camera. Just a second, let's move it to the side, and then in the film option just click transparent instead of sky, and then when you render it out you'll have your logo on a transparent background. So this is looking quite nice. There are also some other settings we can play with, but I will leave these for now for maybe another tutorial. And the only thing we will need to do now is set your output resolution by going here to output. Then as you can see here, this is full HD at 100%. If you, for example, want to double this resolution, you can do this quickly by just typing in 200%, but I will just leave it at 100%, so full HD, or you can just type in any value you want and get that. So if you want to render it now, you just hit F12 or go to render and render image, like so. And then you've got your logo on a transparent background ready to be used. And if you want to save it, you just click on image, save as, and then choose the folder you want to save it to. I'll just save it here, name this number 3, and you have to make sure that you have a file format that supports alpha, of course. So TIFF, PNG, Targa works well. I think OpenEXR also supports alpha. And make sure that you have RGBA selected. If you just have RGB selected, it will make your background black. RGBA stands for red, green, blue, and alpha, of course. So just that, and here you can also choose the color depth and the compression factor. So I'm just going to save this out, and then we're done. So now you have the logo. Very nice. And if you want to have more realistic light, you can also just use Eevee at this point, and you don't even have to do that much of adjusting to get it. So Eevee is a little bit more realistic because it really it's a ray tracing engine, so it really calculates the light bounces of your scene. And Eevee has a lot of faking. It's more like a game engine, so not so accurate, but you can also get some very nice stuff with shorter render times. But if you have a beefy computer, you just want something a little bit more realistic, you can just go to your render settings here, click the render engine option, and then use cycles. And as you can see here, it will take a little bit longer. You'll see a little bit more grain, and the lighting will be a little bit different. So you would have to adjust the light strength or maybe the light size a little bit to get it to where you want to be. So maybe make this a little bit brighter. It really depends. And Yeah, and here in the render settings you can also choose your compute device. Right now mine is running on my CPU, but I have some quite powerful GPU, so I can just switch it to GPU and then it will render a little bit faster. Or a lot faster actually. Alright, and then there's only one more setting. I don't know, you also have to enable transparency here, so go to Film, and then enable transparency here. So you have the transparency enabled. And another thing you're going to want to look out for is the noise of your render. And if you have low samples, so under sampling in the render icon, in the render option, you can see that the samples are by default set to 128, which is quite low if you're not using denoising. But since Blender has denoising nowadays, that's usually enough for simple renders like this. So I would just leave it at 128. Then go to, where is it? The view layer option, enable denoising, go to the drop down. I usually set the strength to something a little bit smaller, so to 0.2.5, and the future strength as well. I seem to be getting better results, but you can also just play around with it and see how your results are. If you like what you see, you can hit render, but before that I will just select the area that I want to render, since we have a lot of wasted space around here, and since cycles takes a little bit longer, I would suggest you do this too, so you save some time. So just by hitting Ctrl B or Command B while you're in your camera mode, you can select the area you want to render, just like this. And if you have the overlays activated here, you'll see that you have this red box, and this is the box that will be rendered. The rest will be just will not be regarded. So if you render it now by hitting F12 or by going to the render option there at the top, we'll get our render. This will take a little bit more time since it's calculating all the light rays in the scene. So if you want something a little bit more realistic, or you want to use a glass material or more complex materials, then cycles would be the better option if you're going for more realism. But in a lot of cases, Eevee will get the job done as well. So here it would be the same procedure. After the render has finished, just go to Image, Save As, and then you'll have your image. Yeah, well, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you learned something from it. And if you have any suggestions on what to improve, just leave them in the comments down below. And thank you for watching. Have a good day.